Welcome to Candybar Antlerboy, a series where I, Mike Rapin, discuss the Netflix original series Sweet Tooth with the one and only IRCB regular Danny.
Hello.
Every week we'll be discussing one episode of the TV series and chatting about the comic of the same name by Jeff Lemire, originally published by Vertigo Comics. And let's get into the show. Today we are talking about Season 2, Episode 7, aka Episode 15, aka I'll Find You, 53 minutes, 58 seconds. Danny, before I get into my big spoilery summary, gotta know, how are you feeling about the penultimate episode of Season 2 of Sweet Tooth?
Mike, going into this, I was very excited. I think we left off in a very sad place in the last episode. It was a mixed
Mhm.
bag of feelings, really. But I think, yeah, overall, it was kind of a kick in the gut at the end. And I was like, okay, you got to do a little something to cheer me up a little bit before we, in this penultimate episode, before we get into it. But yeah,
Yeah.
I'm very excited to talk about this one.
Yeah, I think they're trying to balance the sadness with a ton of lore, which fortunately they opened up this episode with what I put in my notes as chicken lore. So, quick summary here. Spoilers for episode 15 of Sweet Tooth, season 2, episode 7. You've been warned. If you're just starting the show now, I don't know what to tell you. We're gonna spoil everything. But this episode starts off with lore. Flashbacks to Birdie as she creates two viable eggs. Let's Gus go, gets captured, gets released, and heads to Alaska to investigate the Fountain of Youth? Question mark. Bear unites with the gang on the bus, tries to muster up the courage to tell Wendy that they're sisters, and makes a plot-inducing promise that everything will be okay to Tiger. Everyone gets to Yellowstone, and it's kind of nice that the kids get a moment to kind of relax together. Jep and Gus have a heart-to-heart and find a cassette player so Gus can finally listen to Birdie's tape that Bear has been trying to deliver since the beginning of this season, and Gus listens to the tape. Amy tells everyone eventually that she's sick, which, Danny, maybe you had a different interpretation of this. We'll talk about it. And we all get to have a nice cry, and the episode ends with Tiger arriving, injured, and with a warning. Abbott is coming. Um, Danny, I'll be completely honest about this. I did not think that we were going to get so much lore on the second to last episode of this season. Instead, we open up with two potential viable eggs with heartbeats being the theme of this episode. What were your thoughts going through all of this? I kind of know some of it from the
Yeah.
comics, so like I like the way they changed things, but yeah, I'm curious. What were your thoughts here?
So just as far as watching the episode, I thought we were gonna. I was a little upset. I was like, are we gonna get just a full like Birdie episode, and then we're
Oh,
not gonna know anything that's happening to the group?
uh-huh.
That was upsetting. But then we kind of moved along. But it is such interesting lore. Like you get to see Birdie working, figuring out about Gus, then the whole corporation thing,
Mhm.
and then things kind of move along forward. Like all that story that we've been waiting and we really only gotten glimpses of. So it's really really interesting. Um, I think Alaska's such a weird location to pick because it's so far from everything. Like I know they try to make sense
Mhm.
of it in the
Mhm.
show, but yeah, it's a very weird setting. Like it feels almost like how can we put this character as far away as we can from everything else?
Yeah, yeah. Well, we do get a little bit of this lore in the episode, right? About how the woman who's the founder of this company, it turns out she's the descendant of this guy who was looking for the Fountain of Youth up in Alaska. Why would the Fountain of Youth be in Alaska? I don't know. But still, he was up there and his boat got shipwrecked and yada yada yada. And so, like, it's funny because a lot of this ties into some of the weird lore that's in the comics, which I was like, I'm sitting over here like foaming at the mouth with excitement because I'm like, oh, finally, we're getting to the Jeff Lemire weird shit. Um, but no, this instead we get hints at it. I think clearly we have to explore it
Hmm.
in the next season. There's no way they can get around it. But we get these bits about Gus being this immaculate conception, like suddenly an egg started beating.
Yeah,
And then did you notice when they did that zoom out, there was like the big egg in the middle. It almost looked like an ostrich
yeah,
egg. It was so big and weird. And we don't get any follow up on that other than later in the episode, Birdie's boss being like on her
hmm
deathbed,
hmm
right? And I don't know, like totally bizarre. Like again, some of this lines up with what I know about the comics, some of it doesn't. I'm really trying to see how they're gonna bridge these things, but I don't know. What did you take from
I
all
mean,
that?
it just feels like they're leaving a lot of little mysteries open for next season. Because you're right.
Yeah,
Because I
yeah.
think we know that Gus came from a regular sized egg, not this other larger egg that we saw in the little, as they were zooming out.
Mhm.
So we don't get a lot of information there. We don't really get a lot of information as to what they were doing to the eggs to like eventually
Right.
kind of produce this, like you just put on their immaculate conception, like, but they had to have been messing with the eggs somehow, right? Um,
Yeah. There's a mystery component that I don't think we've fully fleshed out in the story, and I don't wanna say anything because again, this is where the Jeff Lemire weird stuff kinda
yeah,
comes in, but, yeah, so I think obviously we'll see more. Clearly, much is to be explored in Alaska as where Birdie is still very much in the story, and, definitely we have questions. I think by the end of the season, we're gonna have even more questions. Because they gotta give us something to hook us for next season,
they
right?
have to.
Um,
Yeah, for sure.
but for the rest of this episode, though, we flash back to the future, and
That's one of my favorite movies.
we get we get like we get maybe one of the best moments in the season. Not that the bear reuniting with the gang isn't something great to be celebrated, but as you predicted last episode, Bobby was in a tank, and I feel like I wrote in my notes Chekhov's tank. If we
Yeah.
see it, we got to use it, and of course that's what happened
Listen, what a
because
I mean, the animal army knows how to make an entrance.
every
Coming
time.
in with the bikes, like just super cool. And then yes, as soon as that hatch opened in the tank, I was like, if that's not Bobby, I'm stopping this episode. And it was Bobby, and it was the best. I wanna take a screenshot of that and just plaster it on my wall. Because it's amazing. We got a lot of Bobby this episode, and I really enjoy that.
Yeah, yeah. I'm glad to have him back as part of the rest of the gang, as well as Bear. I thought it was like a cool moment to have like the guy from the Air Lords, driving in the tank, and I think when Bobby pops out at one point, he says, "Yeah, that's a really cool little kid."
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
such a goofy little moment. But yeah, the gang's now back together. They're heading to Yellowstone. I forgot again that Bear is Wendy's sister, so there's like
Me
this
too.
moment of like, is she gonna tell? Is she not gonna tell? And that kind of becomes Bear's whole thing for the rest of this episode. Um, and Jep and Amy end up having this conversation as they're on their
Oof.
way to Yellowstone. Like Amy's like, "Oh yeah, Jep, I'm sick," and she won't come close to him. And I wrote in all caps, "I hate this. I hate this."
Listen, first of all, Amy, thank you for keeping 6 feet apart. We
Yes,
appreciate that.
yes.
But
Sh
man,
she
it's
understands.
well, it's really the juxtaposition of that pit stop, right? You have all the kids, they stop at a playground. All the kids are
Mhm.
having a great time. But like in the meanwhile, we and Amy and then Jeb have this conversation. And it just like yeah, the way this show just kind of hits you and like throws these little curves at you like with the feelings like, oh my god. It was rough, but
Yeah.
I'm just glad she finally told someone. I figured she was gonna have to tell the kids. By this episode, I just didn't know how fast they were gonna get into it.
Yeah.
Also, is she getting in through the back of the bus to not get Jep and Bear sick? Like, what's going on? What
I
what are the logistics?
I was wondering that exact same thing. I mean, like, let's just not try to figure out the
Yeah,
logistics
yeah.
here. I mean,
No, no.
but the thing that I found interesting about that moment is that Jep says to Amy, "We have the cure. We
Yeah,
can get the
yeah.
cure from Abbott." And of course, Amy had this wonderful moment in the previous episode where she just burned everything down. And she has this one remaining thing that has Roy written on it, and she had this line that really just broke my heart. Like, they killed my boy to make this. I'll never take it. And I about like flipped my desk. I was like, okay, you cannot keep giving me emotional whiplash like this. Like Sweet Tooth subtitle should be emotional whiplash. Like, because I think we've
Yeah,
talked about this last season, we talked about it this season. They do these 1-2 punches of like, aren't we having a good time? And then just socking you in the gut. And I fall for it
every
every
time.
single time.
I almost wanted Jep to say like, or maybe Bear to tell her later, like, you should take it. Like, it's what Roy would have wanted, like something. Because so like his
Yeah.
sacrifices in I understand where she's coming from, but man, there's a yeah that talk about just ethical dilemmas and just like overall like as a mom and stuff like that. So that was rough.
It really, yeah, it's a really tough moment, and we kind of have to drag more. That gets dragged to the rest of
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
episode, unfortunately. Like as the audience knows what's coming, and I think one thing I will credit this show, and I really appreciate it, is the way that they continuously made that actress's makeup like rougher
Mhm.
and rougher as the show went on. Like we saw it a lot with Sing's wife, in previous episodes, but to see Amy as she was, kind of just normal Amy, and then as this episode progresses, and I'm guessing we see it more in the next episode, like she just gets visibly more
Yeah.
sick. It's kind of like a thing to just keep that in the back of your head that like this is getting progressively worse for her. And I don't know if that was like an intention by the art department or whatever, but they did a really good job of showing this progression happen. And I'm going to talk a little bit about time skips here because this episode kind of goes from this playground moment fast forward there at Yellowstone. Now, we don't really know how far away Essex City is from Yellowstone.
Right.
I think so like my guess is that like rather than do if this was a 12 episode season or a 14 episode season, we maybe would have had an episode or two on the road. But I'm glad that we kind of just like fast forward to get to Gus's, so the kids again get to have a nice moment of being kids for a little bit. We get to see them actually like play around and have fun and exploring Gus's cabin, and Gus coming to grips with kind of the last time he was here, the worst thing that ever happened to him happened. You know, so I don't know. I liked the way that they did that, but I did have the question of didn't the last men find this place last season
They did.
in season one, and like didn't they trash it, or am I going crazy?
I think well, I think they were following uh they picked up on the trail that Jeb and Gus left, so maybe they didn't get deep into the woods to find his house. Now I will say, now that you mentioned the
Yeah,
makeup and how Amy's kind of deteriorating because she is sick, I think maybe they used that to show how much time, like it did take a little bit of time to get to the cabin.
tr- very
Um
true.
so maybe because I'm looking at the notes and you're like, yeah, you got they're real fast. Like, I don't know, where is
Yeah,
everything? Like, are they gonna get to Alaska like in one episode too? What is this, Game of Thrones last
yeah,
season?
yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah, interesting. I mean, yeah, those are just some of the little details that I really enjoy about like the show, that they think of things that we may not even be thinking about until we do something like this where we're diving deep and kind of dissecting every moment of it,
yeah,
right? Um,
yeah, yeah.
so very cool.
But yeah, I really am like glad that we got this time in Gus's cabin. Like again, it's weird. Like I really like the 8 episode format. I think it keeps the show ridiculously
Hmm.
concise and like satisfying for me to watch because I don't feel like I have to. There's no filler episodes, right? There's no filler moments. Everything has to be important to the story. Otherwise, what are we doing here,
And
right?
I
Um,
wish I
so
wish I
them getting to this stuff.
oh, sorry, I was
Oh,
gonna
go ahead.
say, I wish I had remembered that Wendy and Bear are siblings, because that would have maybe given me a little bit more motivation on Bear's story. Like, oh, she doesn't care about like this boy, or she's like all the stuff she's kind of doing. It makes a little bit more sense that she
Right.
wants to get to the zoo, even if she has to go like this
Well,
really disconnected way about it.
yeah, see, I was thinking the same thing when I like snap remembered. Maybe it was last episode because we've kind of talked about this on and off as you and I
Yeah,
watched this season. Like that, this is a thing motivating Bear, but Bear doesn't know where Wendy is this whole season. I think it's only until this moment in this season when she gets on the bus, she goes, "Oh my God, there's a little pig
yeah,
girl. That's my sister." Because we saw a flashback, which i- is a ridiculous flashback as far as I'm concerned. Like all of the stuff with Bear is clunky as I think we've lamented multiple
yeah.
times this season. And I think we'll see how the next episode goes, but I feel like I have a lot of summarizing points about like how they could maybe have cleaned that up. But yeah, but still, I think Wendy's whole thing, that is her driving
Hmm.
force, right? Like she is trying to find her sister, but my thought process was that she didn't realize that Wendy was even alive until she gets on the bus, which again could have been a much more impactful moment, could have been much in a way could have been done in a more emotional
Yeah.
way. It feels just so breezed over. And even when Wendy goes to try to talk, or Bear goes to try to talk to Wendy in this episode, it felt like it should have been a bigger moment for the
Hmm.
two of them. And I know we got to keep the show moving and everything, but to me, I just felt like there wasn't the emotional weight wasn't as strong for me as I think the
Yeah.
writing team and the show probably wanted us to feel.
And I
Right?
think the show was aware that it was a very loose thread, because they had to show us the flashback so we would remember,
Yeah, yeah,
right? So
yeah,
it's not like it was at the like there's a lot of things that are in the front of our minds, right? Especially everything with Gus and like all that stuff.
yeah.
But yeah, that all the bear stuff there, like maybe we need to tell the audience again what's going on here, because it's been so long since we even addressed it.
Yeah, but, Bear doesn't get the moment to actually tell Wendy. She tries to bring it up, which, you know what, like, I will say I did appreciate that moment. In my head and in my notes, I said, "Maybe this is what the show needed for
Mhm.
Bear," because Bear's story has been so spotty for us. Like, I actually like when she's back with the group. I think last season we talked a lot about how in those final episodes when Bear and Jep have to, like, are butting
Yeah,
heads as, like, the weird dad, older sister thing, the vibe works. It's actually really, really good. And I loved Jep and Amy and Bear all together because, like, to me, the family, it clicks. And maybe that's what the show is trying to get at. It just doesn't seem obvious to me that that's what they did. To me, it just felt clunky until they got back together. And to me, that's kind of rough
yeah.
from the writing standpoint, you know?
I agree. I agree. I also love them exploring, like all the kids exploring the everything, the cabin. Gus talking about how he burned down his garden. He's like, I was having a
Yeah.
bad day or something. Like, he makes
Yeah,
an
yeah.
offhanded comment. Um,
Yeah, I was just going through some
yeah, I was
stuff,
going through some
Wendy,
stuff.
sorry.
But they find potatoes, which is cool. Like, all these kids, like
Yeah,
they're like, oh, we don't have to eat kibble anymore. Like, finally we can eat something else. Now you're gonna have to eat
yeah.
potatoes. For that, ask what is it, Mark Watney, the guy from Mars, how he feels about eating potatoes every day.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Listen, if you were eating kibble for multiple weeks, I mean, honestly, potatoes are gonna look like a
yeah,
feast. Um, I did appreciate that, like, again, we like you said, kids got to have a little bit of fun. There's this moment where they go to collect
yeah,
water, and the elephant kid comes back and blows it out of his trunk, and I'm like, of course, this for somehow this show, despite its severity at times, manages to find these moments that are like from a children's
hmm
show, and I honestly have to respect it. They definitely lean into it, and they don't shy away from letting these kids have actual joyous fun. And you can tell that even the actors are kind of good at
yeah,
goofing around together. Like it's rare to find a show that has an actual semi-ensemble cast of even side character children that are seen to all be doing their job. And this show is exactly that. Like every single kid actor in the show is nailing it, and it makes it to feel like it's a much more believable situation
for
altogether.
sure. The hybrids are a highlight of this show. Like, bar
Absolutely.
none. So
So yeah, Gus gets to listen to his tape, which is fun, which gives us some more lore. So like as he's listening to his mom, we get to see that she's getting on a plane and she's going out. We get this moment between her and Jillian, who's the head of this company, and Jillian is sick. And it turns out she's patient zero, like she injected something into her body and she's the reason why the sick exist. Danny did not see this coming. Honest to God, did not
me
see it
me
coming.
neither. I think somebody, I think that maybe it was the narrator, made a line about hubris and all that stuff,
Yeah,
and I
yeah,
was like,
yeah.
oh, where are we going with this? And then we get to that, and I was like, ah, of course. Of course, like, you were trying to do whatever you were trying to achieve, probably some like health thing or staying young forever, because that's usually what they're going for. But
hmm
man,
hmm
what a yeah, I really hated that person more now. Uh,
I know. Well, and that's the thing. So we don't know what happened to the other egg, right? Like clearly they raised Gus,
mhm.
and my guess is that they were trying to use the egg or the cells from the other egg because that was the other viable subject. And it seems like she pulled something out of this bad egg, for lack of a better word. And now she's sick because of it, which kind of I'm gonna say, like, it feels like there's a question of is there an opposite to Gus? Is there this yin
Mhm.
and yang concept that clearly the show has been propping Gus up to be this hero type character? And that's kind of the
Yeah.
show. It's about Gus, and he keeps finding himself in these leadership roles, and like Jep finally trusting him, and all the kids looking up to him and stuff. Um, I wonder if there is this antithesis to Gus that is out there. And that I feel like that's
I
kind of what they're trying to tell us without blatantly telling us in the show.
as you were saying that, I was having a big brain moment where I was like, "Wait a minute. Are the
Ooh. Ooh.
hallucinations just like they can see what each other's happening or something like that? Like they're connected somehow?"
Whoa.
Oh man.
Whoa,
Oh
Danny.
man.
Okay.
I
Okay.
like that. I would
Um,
definitely like that if they were linked somehow, but I guess we'll just have to keep watching because man, I hadn't really thought about the other egg and what the implications of that would be in the larger scheme of
mhm.
things. So,
Well, we don't even know if that egg became
right.
anything, right? Like Gus clearly was this baby and they showed off the baby and stuff. Whatever happened to that other egg? Because like,
It's like
if we're lining up the time.
it's top deer,
Go
like, the
ahead.
whole top is deer and just human at the bottom.
I love it. I love it. But it's a question because, like, as far as the timeline is concerned, right? Like, they showed Gus
Mhm.
off as this thing at this shareholder
Yeah,
meeting or something. So where did this other egg go? Maybe that's what we need to find out in the next season. Maybe Birdie will tell us that in a future episode, either the next episode or probably next season.
and
But yeah,
and
a lot of questions
and
still.
then the other question too, like, if Gus is from this egg, what's up with all the other hybrids? Like,
Right. Oh yeah.
where they come from? I don't know. Hopefully, we'll
Yeah.
get
Where
into
did they
that.
come?
If we're gonna get into lore and weird Lemire shit, that better be
Hmm.
part of
Hmm.
it.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess like we're coming to the end of this episode, we get this nice Bear and Jeff moment where that I honestly still loved. I think their interactions are actually some of
Yeah.
the best in the show overall. Like Jeff says this thing like all those kids are gonna need us, you and me. Like Jeff knows that she's all in on this, and obviously he's all in. Like they have to be the adults, if not to be like parents, but to be like
Yeah.
guiders, right? I think we've seen with especially with the way that Amy talks and the way she treats all of these kids, she doesn't treat them like children. She treats them as just people who need to be guided. And so she spends all this time instilling all of these right values and ethics and
Mhm.
stuff into the kids. And obviously it's paid off because every single one of these kids is a sweetheart. And I love that Jeff and Bear come together kind of saying like she's going to be gone soon. We have to be the ones that guide these kids on the right path. And I feel like that's a feel or I think they're both realizing in that moment that that is such a huge burden.
Yep.
Um or maybe not a burden, but it's just a huge set of shoes that they both need to fill.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think they have the work cut out for them. It's gonna be a really big void to fill. But
Mhm, mhm.
but I think the kids have been kind of preparing for this too. And yeah, I'm glad the show never went with like one of them being kind of like a brat or something like that. Like it
Yeah,
feels like it would have been an like just adding more obstacles for no reason when they're all kind of going through
yeah,
all these hardships. So
mhm. Well, they did set up the one kid to kinda be like, he's the bad one,
mm,
except for he's been the bad one and that he just questions
right,
things, but he's never like, "I'm gonna do my own thing," he's never been like the rebel.
right,
Um, but still. But yeah, I don't know, the last bits of this episode, we get Amy talking to these kids around the fire. I think at this point, she's told them all because she takes Wendy off at one point to go
yes,
talk to her, and Wendy and her have this big hug, and that's when the Bear and Jet moment happens. I kind of assumed that the rest of the kids know in this moment, but like as I was reflecting on the episode, I was like, we never really get confirmation whether or not she told them, but like
right.
obviously she's not doing well. So I don't know. What do you think about that?
No, I think it was a little confusing too because at some point I was like, wait, does everybody know now? Like how when
Yeah.
did I miss when she was telling everyone about the sick? Maybe they don't want to make a big deal out of it as far as like making it a whole scene because we know
Hmm.
that the
Hmm.
kids understand, and that's just a good way of letting us know that the kids are
Yeah.
like they took this information in and they're kind of processing it in their way without having to make a big show around it. So I don't know, maybe it was smart, maybe it was for the best, maybe they were just running out of
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
But then
Maybe. Yeah.
I mean, we spent this episode kind of pretty much everything that happened felt pretty important. So yeah,
Yeah.
so maybe they just I don't know. I don't. That is weird. I really thought I missed something. Like I really thought I looked away for a
Yeah.
while and missed it.
Yeah, but I mean, regardless, I think the sentiment is there,
Mhm,
right? Like all of these kids, I think this was also like a really nice moment for us to see Amy interacting with all of the kids, not in a flashback,
mhm.
which could be, tainted by memory if we ever being like super meta about this. Um, and instead we get to see that all these kids like genuinely care about Amy and Amy cares about every single
Yep.
one of them. I think this whole episode has shown that. Like the way she's interacted with people. There's that moment where Bear kind of steps in, which I thought was like a really smart handover moment without it being like, you have to take care of these kids. Instead, Bear steps up, seeing that Amy is kind of just like out of it because this sick is messing with her.
Mhm.
And she says, "Hey, let's play a game." And she gets the kids all roused, taking on like almost grabbing the baton from Amy,
Right.
saying, like, I'm going to make sure these kids are taken care of the same way you would take care of them after all of this is gone. without any words being exchanged. I really
It
love that moment.
it's such a powerful moment because Amy has not had anyone help her out like in that manner since she was stuck in that
Mhm.
building in season one. Like
Yeah.
her
Yeah,
character has
jeez.
gone through so much. It is just such a really, really great arc. So finally having her maybe be relieved of some of this responsibility, um, it's I mean, it just feels like she deserves it. She's been through so much and they've done so much, and she's just kind of a badass. So it's
Yes, absolutely. So, yeah, and, it's definitely, like, I don't know, I'm kinda torn, and maybe we could talk about this more next
yeah,
episode. Obviously, she survives this episode. We kind of end on this moment here, where, we're all settling in, and, I almost felt like kind of upset that they added like an addendum to this episode because I kind of wanted it to end with the fireplace. Like for once,
same.
we don't need a hook. We kind of just need like the end of the episode. Instead, we get this kind of jump shock moment where Jep wakes up. And he's like, "Where's the kid? Where's Sweet
Yeah,
Tooth?" Can't find him. Runs out to the forest, and they're kind of just sitting, just talking. And then Tiger rides up on a bicycle, and suddenly Bear is there, which I thought was funny.
she's like
And in my
Batman just
notes, I wrote,
sneaking
"All
up
right."
on people.
I know, I know. I didn't know a bear could be so sneaky. Um, but yeah, so the episode ends with Tiger riding up on a motorcycle, crashing because she's so injured. Because the animal army tried to take the zoo. Because like in this episode, we didn't really talk about it, but the animal army's kind of been like watching the
Yeah,
zoo and basically waiting to see if Abbott was going to make a move on the kids. And I think they kind of triggered a fight accidentally in the episode. And so we didn't really get a follow up on it, which is why it's not in my notes until the very end of this episode, where we see that like something has happened. Tiger or Bear, yeah, Tiger has to show
mm.
up to say like Abbott's coming, and that's where we end. Which because of course we got to have a cliffhanger, whatever. But yeah, I really wanted it to just end with that nice moment for once, and we could have had the animal army stuff maybe start the next episode. But oh well, oh well.
Yeah. I mean, it feels like they really like to leave these little episodes with something sad, so you'll come back to see if there's more happy in the future.
Oh, of
Um,
course, of
so,
course.
but yeah, it was. I mean, once again, I try not to think about too much of the logistics of the tiger traveling in a motorcycle injured
Oh
all the
right,
way
all the
to
way to Yellowstone.
maybe in
Right.
season three, Lemire will show us a map of where
Yeah, maybe we'll
Essex
get a map at
City
the
is in relation to everything else.
Yeah, yeah, Essex City is like
Yeah.
Metropolis, right? Where it's kinda just close to everything, but also far
Right.
away. Um, it's on the coast, but it's also close to Kansas somehow.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, anyways. Well, I guess I don't know, that was kind of all that's all the notes that I had for this episode. That's kind of everything, that happened. So I guess we can get into our final questions here, which is what was good? I got some thoughts, but Danny, I wanna hear what you thought was good this
Uh,
episode.
I mean, I'm just gonna say I think this episode for me the highlight where was when the kids were having fun moments. Like that was just really
Yeah.
nice to see with them playing in the playground at the pit stop, and then once again when they were playing with Bear, with collecting sticks and in the water and all that, like discovering what potatoes are and stuff. Like there's a lot of stuff they don't know. I think it was a really funny joke that Bear was trying to explain what a cassette is to Gus, but
Mm,
she also doesn't really know. So she
I
just
know,
started
yeah.
naming other media like a CD and like a tape or like
Yeah.
and Jeff's like, "Wait, you don't really know either, do you?" So that was
Right.
really funny.
And I think he says, "Oh, yeah, it plays music," and Gus puts the tape to his
Yeah,
ear. Yeah, there again, this show has the potential to be, like, really fun
right.
and cute and stuff when it wants to, and I appreciate that they do swing us back and forth. Sometimes the pace is whatever, but yeah, that's definitely true. I do love that as well.
Yeah,
Um, my big thing is I just love the gang together. Like, I know that, like, distance makes the heart grow fonder, blah, 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 like, even in television, that's the same, but I have loved this whole episode, them all being together and just getting to see the interactions with all these characters where they've all been kinda segmented into their own thing. Um, I feel like we didn't get a lot of interaction between Gus and Amy, but, like, I also don't think that that was the point of this episode, right? Like, I don't know, I just love seeing them all together and working and feeling like there is a semblance of family and safety. Um, But that does bring me to what was not so
Mm,
good in this episode, in that we spent this whole time getting to Yellowstone. We get to Yellowstone, we get a lot of time with everybody interacting, and then suddenly we're probably not going to stay here anymore because Abbott's coming. What does that mean?
right.
Um, so I feel like that's a bummer, but it also feels a little implied that a bit of time had passed. It wasn't just like a day, like a little bit while had or a little longer had
Mhm.
passed. I can't remember. Yeah, either way, like you said, with Amy's sickness getting a little bit worse and worse, I think that's supposed to be the implication of travel time as well as how much time they spent there. Because obviously the kids are all driving and gelling, and they've worked on the house a little bit to make it livable for everybody.
Right.
I did still find it funny that all the kids slept on the bus even though they have this big old house. But either way,
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think for me the only thing, like we talked about a little bit, maybe it should have ended at a different point. I think I understand why it didn't. Uh, but yeah, overall, I think this was one of the better episodes. I think there was not a lot
agreed.
of moments wasted. I almost when we were listening to the tape, I was like, that's just such a good way to go back and do a flashback. Like you're
Oh,
just kind of like
yeah.
hitting it while it's running. Now I do I went back through your notes and I love that when Gus and tells Jep that he wants to go to Alaska, and then he goes outside and he tells him one of the funniest things in the episode: "Go do your weird deer shit."
Oh,
Because
yeah. Oh, yeah. Right. But that was an episode title at one point, I think.
yeah, yeah. So like, it's easy to forget that Gus is like part deer. Like, is because
Yeah.
like he's not as much of a hybrid as some of the other kids. So like it's easy to forget,
Mhm.
especially now that one of its antlers is kind of it was cut off or whatever. So
Yeah.
but yeah,
Yeah.
this is probably one of the better episodes of the season.
Yeah. Totally. Um, well, yeah, I guess, that kinda wraps things up. I mean, I am gonna be completely honest. I dove right into the next episode, and, I'm guessing you did the same
Yep,
thing,
yep.
and so we're trying to be polite here, so spoilers, we watched the second episode or the last
We
episode already.
we are great
But
at acting like we haven't seen it.
yeah. But yeah, so let's wrap this episode up here. You'll have to catch us next week where we talk about the season finale of season 2 of Sweet Tooth. But for now, you can always check us out on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Discord, our Goodreads. We've got a YouTube channel. You can find us all over the internet. Just search for I Read Comic Books. You can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/IRCB podcast to get early access to this show, as well as the regular IRCB podcast show, plus a slew of shows like A Better Batmobile, which Danny was very recently on. Is an amazing IRCB movie club and so much more. The IRCB Candybar logo was done by TheSamDS. Music for this episode is Beautiful CS by Robert Farmer. I want to say thank you again to Danny for being on the show with me. Thank you to the listener. If you got this far, you're a fantastic human being. And until next time, comics are good, and so are you.